Hillary Clinton, she didn't just write this, by the way. She said it. So I want to play the clip for you so you can exactly see how Hillary Clinton is trying to mimic what is the new talking point from the Harris campaign and the Democrat Party about Donald Trump. The one word, fascist, and then we'll have other people start saying Nazi, and we'll have some others say Hitler, and we'll see if that sticks for these next few days. If not, I'm sure it'll be something else next week.
One other thing that you'll see next week, Caitlin, is Trump actually reenacting the Madison Square Garden rally in 1939. I write about this in my book. President Franklin Roosevelt was appalled that neo-Nazis, fascists in America were lining up to essentially pledge their support for the kind of government that they were seeing in Germany. So I don't think we can ignore it. Now, it may be a leap for some people, and a lot of others may think, I don't want to go there. I don't want to say that. But please open your eyes to the danger that this man poses to our country, because I think it is clear and present for anybody paying attention.
Now, in her book, she writes about Franklin Roosevelt. I'm not calling Franklin Roosevelt obviously a fascist, but it was interesting because he died in his 4th term in office, and we had to put forward a constitutional amendment so that the precedent set by George Washington was actually set in stone, because we saw that there were some leaders who would not just kind of go by tradition and history, and after 2 terms realize that the United States of America, after 8 years, we're going to move on with leadership, and even if you could get reelected again. And so we put forward a constitutional amendment. So you could say all these things about people in the past and differently. Everybody goes to Madison Square Garden. I've been there for concerts. I've been there for the RNC. The DNC has been there. Jimmy Carter accepted the nomination there for Democrats. Bill Clinton did it for Democrats. Hillary Clinton had a rally there. So the idea that it's because it's in Madison Square Garden is ridiculous. It's an iconic place in America. It's almost a venue everyone knows about.
Yeah, it's the most famous arena in the world, I'd say.
It's not
definitely
like the
in
greatest
the country.
Arena.
No, it's been there for decades now.
I remember doing it for the RNC, and it was actually tough because usually you go to the most modern place you can find for production value. Yeah. We were dealing with 500,000 anti-war protesters.
Madison Square Garden.
Bush was being called Hitler then too, by the way. Now, they weren't saying he was Hitler because of where we decided to have the Republican convention. The location stuff, to me, remember, it was Joe Biden who came out with the black background, the red and black background, and the 2 Marines during a political speech. So he used the U.S. military and their imagery for a political speech to attack Donald Trump. It looked a lot more like you were emulating the backgrounds of fascists and Nazis, and what he said was kind of emulating, and they actually realized that was a very bad look, and they moved on. Again, bad look, and they moved on. Like I said.
Madison Square Garden, you said, is probably the most famous. It's definitely the most famous arena in our country. I don't think there's most arenas that people can just name that aren't in your local market.
It's called the Garden.
Yeah, the Garden or MSG. People know these things. It's been around. It's hosted some of the biggest events ever. Billy Joel just wrapped up his 100th and whatever show. It is one of those places that is iconic. It's easy to get to also if you're in New York City. So it's convenient in that way. But like you said, it's an old dated venue, but with so much history and Americana associated with it, it's also one of the most restricted arenas in the country. I know from people that deal with them, they have a lot of restrictions on what you can and cannot do at Madison Square Garden and who can be there and can't be there within certain amounts of time. So there's a lot of things like that in terms of security and all of that gets taken care of when you work the Garden.
You go to Madison Square Garden, you go to New York City, not only because it's tri-state, you're also Pennsylvania, which is a swing state, is not far away, but there are a lot of people who vote at their home states who are temporarily in New York for periods of time because of work. So you're getting basically a snapshot of all 50 states when you're in New York City, not just the tri-states, but definitely add to that a major swing state, which is Pennsylvania. I mean, it's sometimes only 40 minutes away from parts here. So you're getting this iconic imagery that Hillary Clinton thought was cool to use because she was there in 2016. And just because Donald Trump wants to, again, not start wars, make America great again by having a strong military so you don't have to go to war. This is the guy who recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. This is the president who said the Golan Heights were going to be recognized by the U.S., and he handed it over to Netanyahu as part of Israel. Okay? He went as president, not just because when he was running for president, to the Western Wall in East Jerusalem, which most supporters of Palestinians think should be going back to the Palestinians. Even though the Israelis keep it open for all major religious faiths to be able to utilize, whether it's Muslims at the Dome of the Rock, Jews at the Western Wall, Christians at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, they make sure to protect all of those sites so that people have the freedom to worship and visit them for their historical purposes. But even the Abraham Accords that followed those two moves, and there was no, by the way, people thought you could never do that without a two-state solution. Those, part of that move was because those countries, people wanted to be able to visit Jerusalem, and it wasn't Israel that barred them from visiting Israel and Jerusalem. It was their own countries who their passports were no good. It would say that. You cannot travel to Israel on this passport, and you'd be in serious trouble too. So that was part of it, was just tourism, religious tourism. And so I think, Will, this idea, again, they don't talk about any of his policies. But to me, I mean, maybe they're at a point now where they would call Netanyahu this. It's like, is the term now not, it's like he's anti, is it really about Jews? Is it, I don't even know. Or it's because I guess they don't care about what he did for Israel. But the idea is, if this is what you're throwing out a week before, not good.
Well, and we even talked about that this playbook for the Democrats goes back to even President Truman calling Thomas Dewey Hitler and likening him to Hitler as a fascist tool back in October 26th of 1948. So the history of Democrats using Hitler as a label for a Republican challenger is a long one. The problem here is that it seems like they've exhausted all of their other plans to go after President Trump, and they're reverting back to what the entire country was up in arms about and warned about after the Butler, Pennsylvania failed assassination attempt when President Trump was shot. Then you had Kamala Harris in front of the vice president's residence just this week talking about General Kelly's alleged statements and bringing up all of these things. Now it is the principal and the other high-level surrogates that are doing this again. They have not just doubled down, but they have added gasoline to that fire. They are ramping up these attacks at a very dangerous time. And as you have referenced, Jordan, that your concern is about the country in the time after the election to Inauguration Day if President Trump wins, because of how bad this rhetoric has been. They have put, and Joe Biden even said, we need to put a target on him. He later apologized and said wrong timing because of the assassination attempts. But that is effectively what the Democrats have done. And they have made running for the president of the United States, if you're a conservative, much more dangerous than it ever has been.
Donald Trump's risking his life every time he goes out in public. And you could say he was a big enough person, obviously celebrity-wise, that he already took that into consideration. But until he had run for president this time, no one had actually fired a shot at him. I'm sure there were people that have been stopped before and that we don't know about. But they've now, and then not only that, then someone else tried to do it a few weeks later. I mean, the idea is, again, you demonize your opponent to a point of calling them basically Satan